Hello. This is our project on the landmark U.S. Supreme Court cases of the Civil Rights of 1960s Act. Dalry Mapp lived in Cleveland, Ohio. One day, 3 police officers showed up at her house after receiving an anonymous tip that she was hiding a bombing suspect. They said, "Come on, bro, let me in." The police officers demanded to be let into the residence, but Dalry refused to let them in without a warrant. 3 hours later, they came back with what they said wasn't a warrant and forced entry on her house. They found not the suspect, but they did find drugs and illegal photos in her basement in a trunk. And they said, "Taking you to the jail." And then no one ever found the warrant, so it wasn't in the court, and so they decided that they couldn't try her because they didn't have a warrant, and so it was violating her 4th Amendment rights, which is something against her searches and seizures. It was just violating the 4th Amendment. Alan Bake was a 35-year-old man who applied to the University of California for medical school and got rejected twice. His GPA and test scores were better than the minorities who were getting spots in the school, so he took the case to the Supreme Court. The case did not reach a majority opinion. 4 justices reached an agreement saying that the racial quota supported by the government violated the Civil Rights Act of 1964. 4 other justices stated that the use of the race for admissions criteria is acceptable. Justice Lewis F. Powell, Jr. had an opinion that the racial quotas used at the university violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The impact of the case minimized white opposition while extending gains for racial minorities. This 1896 U.S. Supreme Court case upheld the constitutionality of segregation under the separate but equal doctrine. It stemmed from an 1892 incident with an African-American train passenger, Homer Plessy, who refused to sit in the Jim Crow car, breaking a Louisiana law. Rejecting Plessy's argument that his constitutional rights were violated, the court ruled that the state that implies merely a legal distinction between whites and blacks did not conflict with the 13th and 14th Amendment. Restrictive legislation based on the race continued following the Plessy decision, its reasoning not overturned until Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka in 1954.
Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, in 1954 was a landmark United States Supreme Court case in which the court declared state laws establishing separate public schools for black and white students to be unconstitutional. The decision overturned the Plessy versus Ferguson decision of 1896. This ruling paved the way for integration and was a major victory of the civil rights movement. The case of Brown versus the Board of Education included 5 cases in itself. All were NAACP-sponsored cases. The NAACP Chief Counsel, Thurgood Marshall, argued the case before the Supreme Court, resulting in a unanimous vote of 9-0. Roe v. Wade, landmark decision by the U.S. Supreme Court on the topic of abortion, 1973. The case was based on reproductive rights. The holding, a Texas law was struck down that made abortion illegal except where the life of the mother was in danger. The court ruled that the right to privacy under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment applied to a woman's rights to have an abortion, even though the decision must also take into account that the state will have regulations that the woman must comply with that will, quote, protect women's health and protect the potential of human life. The court resolved that the fact that the states have become more interested in the abortion as the time progresses in a pregnancy. Short-term effects. After the Roe v. Wade decision, state legislature began passing laws in hopes of creating exceptions to the case or making up areas of law that rule did not directly address. Long-term effects. The case began an ongoing new era of legal and political conflict that is still occurring today in American society. As an effective, this is the American audience is largely exposed to the issues such as reproductive health in the privacy of one's body. The structure that seemingly dominated the legal system has its presence in not only the anti-abortion movement, but also the laws that were reenacted after the Roe versus Wade case that prohibited access to proper health care for women who wanted abortion. Now, when the ideology of the right to due process for every individual becomes a discussion, it is lost when the abortion debate comes up because many of the morality that has become a part of the legal and political atmosphere in society. Ernesto Miranda was accused of kidnapping and raping a woman in 1966. He was finally contained, and after 2 hours of consecutive questioning, he confessed. The police violated his Fifth Amendment right, which gives him the right to refuse any questioning. Also to an attorney. The same situation happened to 3 other men. Miranda took his case to the Supreme Court, saying that they violated his Fifth Amendment rights. The judges sided with Miranda with a 5-4 vote, thus creating the Miranda rights, which are as following.
LOL. Okay, I'm done with this.